What's up everybody, welcome back. In this episode we're going to take a look at our containers to make sure that we can take and place items from them. So we're going to add a button quickly to make sure that we can test it, and then in later episodes we're going to make sure that we're using our drag and drop system. And then we're going to make sure that the container contents will also save to our save game, and we're going to add a little debug to our server screen so we can count all of the items in the map and we can easily see if everything is saved correctly. So yeah, that's today's episode. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a like on the episode, and you're welcome to join the gamedev Raw Discord, and you can also join the YouTube channel if you want to become a member. So you will get access to the premium channel in the Discord, and that will also give you a few premium downloads like this project file and the project files from the multiplayer series. So let's start with today's video. So first of all, there's two small things that we need to take care of. If we go into our BP container, we want to make sure that our container contents array is set to replicate. So replication replicated. And we need to dive into our inventory widget. So let's go to the widgets folder. And over here in the setup inventory grid function, we have the isWorldItem boolean, and we do not want to set it manually, but we want to plug in the input from the event. That's the world inventory, so we can make sure that that's handled automatically. So just get the world inventory boolean from the function and plug this in here, and then that's good to go as well. So that out of the way, we can go into our game mode, and we're going to create two functions, one for adding an item to a container and one for removing an item from a container. So let's just create one new function over here, and that's going to be add item to container. And we are going to need two inputs. The first one is our container contents array, so that's just going to be the contents. And then the contents array. And for the second input, we want to get a reference to the actual container. So that's going to be the BP container. And that's our BP container blueprint. And that's not going to be an array, that's a single variable. So first of all, we are going to create a for each loop in here, plug in the contents. And then we're going to loop through the contents and add them to the players array, or the containers array. So we're going to add a few local variables to make our lives a little bit easier. So first of all, let's add the local item to add. And that's a name variable. Then we're going to need the amount to add, and that's an integer. So local amount to add. And turn that one into an integer. And we have a boolean that tells us if it's a new item or not. So local is new item. And then we're also going to use a few integers to make the graph look a little bit neater. So that's going to be a local current amount in container. Current amount in container. And then we also have the item index in container and the container. That's the last one actually. So local item index in container. And then we should be good to go for now. So we're going to break the array element over here. So break it, and then we're going to store the item row name and the amount. So that's our local item to add and the amount to add. So plug those in first. And we also want to make sure that we set our boolean for the isNewItem immediately to true over here. So we want to make sure that the local isNewItem actually is a boolean. And then we're going to drag it in and set it to true. So then we're going to grab another for each loop, and this time we're going to loop through the array of the container. So we're going to grab the container from the inputs over here, so we can just do get BP container. So then we're going to grab the contents from the container that we're going to add the items to. So get contents, and we're going to loop through those. So we're going to grab a branch, and then we want to know if we already have this item or not. So let's grab the array element over here, and we're going to break this as well. And then we want to compare the names over here. So drag off the name, compare, and compare that to our item to add. So if this is true, then it's actually not a new item. So then we're going to set our local isNewItem boolean to false over here, plug it into the true pin. And then we want to set the current amount in container and the item index in the container. So first of all, the current amount is just the amount that's in the container already. We can grab it from the structure. And then the item index in the container is the array index from the for each loop. So we can plug that in over here and make sure it's hooked up as well. So then we want to break the for each loop. So I kind of messed up because we need a for each loop with break. So let's move over the pins quickly. Oh. Okay, that should be better. So then we can hook the true branch up to the break from the for each loop. So we found the item that we want to find, so we can stop looping. There we go. And then we want to grab a branch to check if this is a new item or not. So let's grab a branch, plug in the local isNewItem boolean. And then depending on if it's new or not, we're simply going to add it, or we're going to add it to the existing amount. So let's do the top branch first, and let's drag in the container contents array from here. So we can copy that and paste it over here. And we're simply going to add something to it. So add, plug it in over here. And because this is a new item, we can simply use the amount as the amount to add. So we can drag off here and make a structure. Plug in the item to add, and then also plug in the amount to add. And that's already good to go. So if it's not a new item, then we can kind of do the same thing. So we can copy and paste it over here. But this time we want to add it to our existing amount. So let's just disconnect this one. And we're going to add the amount to add to our current amount in container. So we can simply drag that in over here, plug it in, and then that should be good to go as well. So let's see. No, that's not true, by the way, because we want to use a set array element over here, because we are overriding an existing value and we're not adding one to it. So just plug this in over here, plug the contents in here, and then we're going to grab the index from the item index in container. So that's the for each loop index from here. And let's just enable size to fit, that doesn't hurt. So now this should work, and we can get rid of the add node over here. So the top one is add and the lower one is set array element. So after we did all of that, then we are pretty much good to go for adding the items. So we can grab the completed pin from the first for each loop, and let's add a return node from here. So that's the add item to container function. And now we want to make sure that we do the similar thing for removing an item. So we can pretty much duplicate it, because we need a lot of the local variables as well. But then I'm just going to delete the graph and make it all over, because it's pretty easy to miss something or make a mistake if we start replacing things. So let's just duplicate the function. So this is going to be remove item from container. And like I mentioned, I'm just going to get rid of everything in here to make our lives a little bit easier. And we do need most of the local variables, so let's just keep those for now. We want to change the isNewItem into the local isItemFound boolean, so isItemFound. And then we should be good to go for now, so let's just start building this up as well. We're going to add a for each loop, plug it in and plug in the contents. And then we want to loop again through all of the contents from the container to remove them. So first we're going to store all of this in our local variables. So drag off here and break the structure. So this is our item to add, plug it in, and also our amount to add. And in this case, that's actually the item to remove and the amount to remove, by the way. So we might want to take care of that. So everything matches up again. For the local item found boolean, this time we're going to set it to false over here. And then we're going to grab our second for each loop. So this is going to be a for each loop with break again, by the way. So look for a for each loop with break. Oh, this is a for loop with break. Pretty cool. Okay, so let's just grab the container from the input of the function. So get BP container. And we're going to grab the contents from that container. So get contents. And we're going to grab a for each loop with break over here. So that's better. So again, first we're going to break this structure. And we want to compare the names again, so grab a branch over here, plug it in, and we want to check if the item row name over here matches our item to remove. Oh, fine, okay, so that's over there. Then if this is true, we're going to set our item found boolean to true. And we want to set the amount in container and the index in container again. So set local current amount in container and plug that into the structure item amount. And again, the index in container comes from the for each loop over here. So we're going to drag in a setter, plug in the array element and plug that in over here as well. So then we want to break the loop again because we have the information that we need. So let's break it. And we're going to grab a branch to check if this item is found or not. So let's drag in our branch over here. So if the item is not found, something is wrong. There's not really much we can do except for adding a print maybe, but something is off if this happens. So let's add a print over here. I'm going to say item to remove not found, and then the function where that happened. So plug it in over here. And then if this is true, then we can remove it from the container. So first of all, we're going to grab the current amount in container and we're going to subtract it. And we want to subtract the amount to remove. So plug that in over here. We can probably store this in a local variable. So let's do that. Promote to local variable, and that's our new amount in container. So local new amount in container. Well, just make it new amount, that's fine. Plug it in over here, and then we're going to check if this is greater than 0. So greater than, grab another branch over here, plug it in. And if this is false, we want to remove the item from the array. So we're going to grab our BP container contents array and plug it in into the false bin with a remove index node. So drag off the array, remove index, plug it in, and we want to remove the index from the index in container. So that's our local variable, item index in container, plug it in over here, and that's good to go. And for the true bin, we want to set an array element again. So let's grab the container contents, plug it in with a set array element node. And this time we want to make the structure. And then we can grab the item to remove over here and simply set it to the new amount in container. Plug that in over here. So let's enable size to fit to make sure, and we need our item index in container for the index for the array. So we can simply plug that in as well. So that's our remove item from container function. And now let's just go back to the first for each loop over here to add a return node. So we know if we want to add more to this function, then this is the place to go. So return node. There we go. So that's done as well, and now we want to create two replicated functions inside of our character, so we can call this. So these events are on the game mode, so they are only accessible by the server. So if we want to take or place items from a widget, we are coming from an owning player, so that's the local player. and we want to make sure that we can pass on these events to the server. So let's add two replicated events to the character. The first one is going to be server add item to container. So custom event, server add item to container. And for this event, we want to set it to run on the server, and we want to grab the game mode. So we already have that inside of our variables over here, and we can simply call the add item to container function that we just created. So plug it in over here. We're going to pass on the contents into the event, and for the BP container we can actually grab our opened container variable and plug that in over here. And then this one should work. And we can do the same thing for removing an item. So we're going to create a second custom event, server remove item from container. Again, this needs to be set to run on server, and we want to call our game mode, and this time remove an item from container. And we can do the same thing, so we're going to plug in the contents into the event, and we're going to grab the opened container from our variables and simply plug in this one. So this should be good to go. And now we can take a look at our container blueprint to update the inventory for all players that are accessing it. So if we go into the BP container, we're going to create an event in here that's called container contents changed. So let's create a custom event. Container contents changed. So we're going to call this event from the game mode, and the server is going to call this. So we do not need to replicate it to the server or anything. The server will be the one calling this event. Then we're going to grab a for each loop and plug in all of the interacting players. So that's all of the players that are currently interacting with this container. And we're simply going to update the inventory grid. So we can drag off the array element from the players and get the player controllers. So that's the third person controller. And from the controller we can call our HUD update inventory grid. So update the inventory grid, plug it into the loop body, and we want to update the world inventory. So let's enable that boolean, and we can simply plug in the contents from the variables into the node over here, and that should update the inventory widget for all of the players that are currently inside of this container. So we need to make sure that we call this event from the game mode. So let's go back to our third person game mode. And for the add and remove item events, so let's do adding first. So right before the return node, we simply want to add a call to the container to update the contents. So we can grab the container from the input over here, and then simply call the contents changed event and plug it in before the return node. And do the same thing for removing an item. So drag off the container and call the contents changed event. So that should work. Now let me see. We have those set up. So we want to go to our third person character and make a few small changes in there, and then the adding and removing item should be good to go. So let's dive into the third person character, and in here we need to go into the add item to inventory function, and over here we actually remove the pickup from the save game if we put it inside of our player's inventory. But if we grab an item from a container instead of grabbing it from the world, we do not want to remove it from the save game. So we want to make sure that the BP pickup variable over here is actually valid, and then we want to remove the item from the save game. And if it's not valid, then we do not want to mess with the save game for the items. So we can simply grab an isValid node over here. So let's check if the pickup is actually valid. And if there's no actual pickup actor, that means we are coming from a container. So we're going to move this right to the beginning over here. So after the first for each loop completed, we're going to check if the pickup is valid. If it's valid, we're going to continue like we did. So we're going to remove the item from the save game. And if it's not valid, we actually only want to save the inventory and then update the HUD. So for the not valid pin, we want to skip the third person game mode call to remove the saved pickup actor. So that should be good to go. And now, because we are previously only removing and adding items with our interface, and the interface was set to run on the server, but now we are also going to start adding and removing items from the player's inventory with the widgets. So those are the local or actually owning clients. So we need to make sure that we have replicated events for that as well. So that's similar to these events, simply to add and remove an item from the inventory on the server instance. So let's create a custom event, server add item to inventory. And we want to simply call our add item to inventory function over here, plug it in, and we can pass on both the variables in this case, so the pickup contents and the pickup. And we want to make sure we set the event to be run on server. And then do the same thing for removing an item. So custom event, server remove item from inventory. And again, this is set to run on server, and we're going to remove an item from inventory, plug it in, and simply pass on the variables as well. So now we can make sure that if the local client wants to do something, they can call these events and pass them on to the server. So that should work as well. Now we're going to quickly add two buttons to our inventory widget so we can take and place an item from a container. And in next episodes, we're actually going to use our drag and drop system, but that's going to take a bit more work to put in. So for now, that we can simply test if this is working, we're going to go to our player inventory and add two simple buttons. So I'm going to grab my notes quickly. So over here for the close container one, I want to duplicate it twice. So we have two more buttons over here. So let's just wrap this one in a horizontal box because a border can only have one child. So right click the button, wrap with a horizontal box. Where it's at, over here. And after that you can duplicate the button. So I'm going to add two more to them. And let's see, they are aligned to the left. So I want the close container one to be all the way to the right. So I'm going to drag that all the way down. If that's it. Oh, come on. There we go. So close container is to the right. And then the first one is going to be to take an item. So let's call this button take item. And let's change the text. So take item. And the second one is our button place item. And let's change the text over here as well. So that should work. Now let's go into the graph and make sure the buttons do something. So I'm going to switch my notes quickly. We want to grab an event construct to save our let me see, third person character. So let's do that first because we don't have it yet. No. So let's right click, event construct. And we're going to grab our owning player pawn. So right click, get owning player, and then you can actually get the owning player pawn directly without going to the player controller. So grab the pawn and we're going to cast it to our third person character. And we want to save this as a variable, so drag over here, promote, and that's our BP third person character. Oh really, I don't like spaces, but whatever. So for the button place item, let's add an on-clicked event over here. And then we're simply gonna wrap the first item inside of the players array, and we're gonna place that inside of the container. So we cannot actually choose which item we want to move at this point, but like I mentioned, it's just for testing now. So we do not want to put in too much work. So let's grab in our inventory slots player over here, and we're gonna get a copy. So get the first index, index 0, that's fine. And we want to grab the item row name from here. So get item row name. And then we want to store the item row name inside of a variable. So let's drag off here and we're going to promote to variable, and we're not going to use this forever. So this is going to be temporary and then item name. So let's grab a branch over here first, and we want to check if the array is not empty. So drag off the inventory slot player and we're going to look for is not empty. Plug it into the condition. So if it's not empty, we're going to plug in the setter for the name, and then we can grab our third person character reference. And from here we can remove the item from our inventory. So remove item from inventory, and we actually want to call the server one. So server remove item from inventory, because right now we are the local client and we need to make sure this ends up on the server. So we do not want to drop it into the world. We're going to leave that as it is. Drag off the item info and make an array. So make array. And we only want to add one index in here. So we're going to make the content structure, and then we can plug in the item. So that's the temp item name. And we're simply going to set the amount to 1. So we remove or add one item at a time. And after that we can drag off the third person character again, and we can add the item to the container. So again, call server and then add item to container. Plug it in and simply plug in the make array result into the contents, and that should move the item over. So we can do the same thing for this was placing, so for taking an item. So button take item, let's add an on clicked event as well. This time we want to grab the inventory slots from the world. So we could actually well, let's just drag in inventory slot world over here, and we're gonna get the copy from the first index, get the item row name, and then we can do the same stuff. So we want to check if the array is not empty, and we're going to store the item name inside of our variable. And this time we want to remove an item from the container. So let's drag in our third person character, server remove item from container, plug it in over here, and we need to make an array with the inventory structure again. So we can drag it off here, paste it over here, plug this into the input, and we can grab the temporary item row name and simply set the amount to 1. And after that we want to add it to the player's inventory. So drag off the third person character again and server add item to inventory. So plug this in over here. For the contents we're going to grab our array, and we can leave the BP pickup empty, so that will make sure that the pickup does not get removed from the item save game, because it's not actually an item in the world. So this should work. Okay, so compile and save this, and then I think we should be good to go to give this a little test, and then we're going to continue by making the contents of the container safe on the save game. So let's see what happens. I have a 2-player game active here. I'm going to select my save slot with the client. So let's check it. I have 2 orbs in my inventory. That should be fine. So let's go to the container over here. So we have the take and place item buttons. I'm gonna just place my 2 orbs in here. So there's 6, that works. And let's see if I can grab them all as well. So I have 6 orbs now, so that should work as well. Now let's see if the server drops something inside of the container, if the client can actually see that. So I'm just gonna drop my 2 dishes in here, and let's see what happens if the client checks this out. So that's working as well. And maybe we can check the simultaneous update as well. So if the server also gets into this container and he wants to actually take the dishes, then you can see for the client it live updates as well. So that's working. So I think for now this should be good to go, and we can start setting up the saving for the container contents. Let's go inside of the save data folder, and I want to create another structure for the containers. So it's actually a similar structure. You could choose to add it to the same structure, but I want to keep things separated. In the end, it doesn't really matter anyway. So I'm just going to right click, blueprint, and create a new structure. And this time that's my world info containers. So world info containers. And let's set it up so it's actually similar to the other structure. So we want to grab our container row name. Let's see, container row name. So that's our name variable. And then we want to grab the container contents. And that's a content array. So let's select our inventory contents and then turn it into an array. And the last thing we need is the actual world transform. The world transform. And that's a transform and a single variable again. So that should be good to go. And then we can make sure that we add an array for this to our save game. So the save game world, let's open that one up and we can add a similar array. So we're going to add all pickup actors, all container actors info. So all container actors info and turn that into our world info for the container. And that's an array again. Compile this and save it as well. So we can now store the containers in a separate array, and we want to go inside of our game instance to create a function in here that we can call to save everything. So let's create a new function, and I'm going to call this update saved container actors. So update saved container actors. And we want to plug in our container contents, world info array. So we're going to give it an input, all container actors info. Oh, really? I need to select it. All container actors info. So that's our world info for the containers. And turn this one into an array. Then we can simply drag in the save game world, and we want to drag off here and set all the container actors info. So set all container actors info, plug in the input from the function over here, and we simply want to save the game. So save game to slot, and we can use the slot name from the variables. So that's our game world save slot. And we're done over here. So let's compile and save this one. And let's go into the actual container. So we're going to add one new variable in here, and that's our container row name. So set this up first, container row name. And this is a name variable, and we want to expose this on spawn. So instance editable and exposed on spawn, both enabled. Compile and save it. And then we can go into our game mode to make sure that everything actually saves. Inside of our third-person game mode, first of all, we need two more variables. So let's create one that's going to be all saved container actors. So all saved container actors. And that's an array of our containers. So BP container. And turn this one into an array. And we also need an array for the info structures. So that's all saved container actors info. And that's also an array, but this time it's the world container info. So those are good to go. Then we want to create a function to set up the container actors if we load the level. So let's create a new function, setup container actors. And we're going to give this two inputs. The first one is the container actors info array. So that's all container actors info. And again, this is our world container info. And that's an array. And the second one is the first time loading map boolean. So is first time loading map. Oh, really? And that's a single variable, and this time it's a boolean. So first we're going to check if it's the first time that we are loading this map, and if it is, we want to grab all the information from the level, and otherwise we're going to grab the information from the save game. So just to make it a little bit more clear, I'm going to add 2 prints in here. So if this is true, then no saved container actors were found, and we're saving the containers from the world into the save game. And if it's false, we actually using the information from the save game to populate the world with containers. So let's do the upper one first, and we're going to grab all actors of class. So get all actors of class. And we want to get all of the containers. So that's our BP container array. We can simply store this inside of all saved container actors. So let's plug it in over here. And then we're going to grab a for each loop. We're going to loop through all of them. There we go. And then we can grab a set array element for the all container actors info. So let's drag in that array and set an array element. We want to plug it into the loop body and make sure that the indexes match up. So we're going to plug in the index pin. And we can make a structure over here. So then we can drag off the array element and we can look for the variables that we need. So get the row name and then also get the contents. And the last thing we need is the transform. So get actor transform. And we can simply plug them into our structure and make sure that we set the size to fit boolean for the set array element. So those arrays should match up and we have all the correct information in here. Then we want to go to our third person game instance. So we have a variable for that as well. And we want to update our saved container actors. So update saved container actors, not pickup actors. And this time plug in the saved container actors info array over here and make sure that we hook it up to the completed pin of the for each loop. So that will save everything to our save game. And then we can return from here. So this branch is done. Oh, freaking. So let's grab a return node. Thank you. And that's good to go. And for the other branch, we're going to do it a little bit differently. So again, first we're at the false branch now. First, we're going to grab all the actors of class from now again. So get all actors of class, and we want to get all of our containers. And we want to simply remove them. So we're going to grab a for each loop over here. And all of the containers that are in the level by default are going to be moved. So destroy actor. Plug it in over here, and then we want to grab the content array from the input. So we can grab the array from the function over here, container actors info, and we're going to grab a for each loop, plug that into the completed pin of the other for each loop, and we want to create our containers from the information on the save game. So let's drag off the loop body and we're going to spawn an actor from class. So we want to spawn a container actor, and that will give us the pins exposed that we need. So now we can simply drag off the array element and we want to break it. So we can plug in the container row name, the contents and the transform from here, and that should work. Then we want to make sure that this is actually valid, so it actually spawned correctly. So drag off here and look for is valid. Plug it in over here. And if it's valid, we're going to add it to our all saved containers array. So let's drag in the all saved container actors. And let's add it to that one first. So add, plug it into the is valid node and make sure that we grab the return value and plug that in over here. And we also want to update the saved container actors info array. So let's drag that in as well. And this time we're going to set an array element again. Plug it into the add node and also grab the index from the add node. So those two will match up again. Let's enable size to fit. And we can actually grab the item from the for each loop and plug it in directly. So there's no need to make a new structure. Just grab it from here. And that's good as well. And then you want to make sure that you continue from the completed pin over here to the return node. So plug it in over here. Do not accidentally plug in the set array element to the return node because you're gonna run into problems. Okay, so this one should be good to go as well. So we need to go into the event graph and make a call to this function. So switching my nodes quickly. Event graph, and we have our event begin play over here, and we're checking the branch is first time loading map. Then we're setting up our pickup actors, and right after that we're going to set up our container actors as well. So let's drag in setup container actors and plug it in. So we can simply grab the boolean we already have over here is first time loading map, and the container actors info comes from our save game as well. So let's drag off the save game world and get all container actors info and plug this one into the setup container actors function over here. That should take care of the containers, and now we also want to make sure that we save them if we take or add an item to them. So if we go to the add item to container function, and again I'm going to grab my notes so I do not mess this up. So this time we want to grab the container index from the world array as well. So we want to add a little bit in front of this for each loop. So first let's do that, make a little bit of room. And we have our all saved container actors array. We're going to drag it in and we're going to find the container that we actually want to mess with. So let's find and plug in the container from the input. So we're going to store this inside a local variable, and that's the container world index. So drag off here, local variable, local container world index, and plug it in over here. So we want to make sure that this is actually valid. So let's drag off here and do greater than or equal to 0. So if the find node can't find it, it will return -1. So we're going to check it just to make sure. Grab a branch over here and plug it in. So from the true pin, we can continue to our for each loop, and that should be good to go. If this is false, there's something wrong. So you could choose to add a print in here. So now we have the container world index in a variable. So that's the index of this container inside of the container actors array. And then we want to go to the end of the function. So let's see over here. Container contents changed and then the return node. So right in front here, we're going to add a little bit of stuff. So we're going to drag in the all saved container actors. And first we're going to set an array element. So for the index, we can grab the container world index that we just made over here. So that's this variable. And then we want to drag in the actual container as the item. So that's the container input from the event. So we have already got a pin for it over here. Plug it into the item. And this should be set to size to fit to make sure it works. Then we're going to grab the pin from the contents changed and move it over. So this is the first thing we do after the for each loop completed. Set the all saved container actors array. Then we're going to do the same thing for the container actors info. So let's drag it in as well and set an array element. Plug it in over here. Again, we're going to use the container world index, and we want to make the structure. And this time we want to drag off the BP container again over here, and we can get the row name and the contents and the transform as well. Actor transform. So if we plug these in over here, make sure the array element is set to size to fit. And after that, we want to call our third person game instance to update the container actors. So let's drag in the game instance reference and call our update saved containers. Plug it in over here and make sure that you actually plug in the container actors info array as well. So that should make sure that everything saves if we add an item to the container, and we want to do the same thing if we remove an item. So we can actually copy these ones, and then we can copy the struct as well, and this stuff. That should work. So you can copy pretty much all of them except for the local variables to make sure that we do not end up with messed up references. So into the remove item from container, and let's paste the nodes that we copied first. So we're going to need them at the end over here. Then the first thing we want to do is make sure that we set up the world index again. So we're going to find the container in the container array. So let's make a little bit of room in here. Drag in our saved container actors and find it. Plug in the actual container and store this one inside of our local variable. So local container world index. And make sure that it's valid. So we're going to check if it's greater than or equal to 0. Grab a branch, plug it in. And if this is true, continue to the for each loop again. And then we're going to go back to the end of the function. So for the completed pin, move it over to the set array element for the all container actors. And then we can drag the BP container from the input again. So let's make sure that we grab the correct one, plug it into the item over here. We need the local container world index plugged in into the set array element nodes, both of them. And then we can drag off this container to make our contents array. So we're going to get the row name and the contents and the transform. And plug those into our make structure. So actor transform. And after we did that, we are going to call the game instance to update the actors. So let's plug in the pin over here. So we continue the function and that should be good. Okay, so I think this should work as well. Now let's quickly add a little debug to our HUD so we can count all of the items in the map, and this is actually really easy to make sure that everything saves and loads correctly. So I highly recommend that you actually add this as well. So let's dive into the widgets folder, and first I'm going to create a simple widget to make our lives a little bit easier. So user interface widgets, user widget, and this is the widget blueprint item counter row. So item counter row. And let's open this one up. So I'm going to drag in a horizontal box just directly in here, and inside of the horizontal box I'm going to drop some text. So the first one is going to be the text item name. And we want to make sure it's a variable, and then I'm going to align the vertical to the top. So like this. And I'm going to duplicate this one, and that's the item count, or yeah, item amount. Let's do that. So that's also text. Let's make sure that it's 0. Why not? So I'm going to change the font over here and shrink it down a little bit. So I might want to do that over here as well. And then for the item name, I'm going to set the minimal desired width over here to 200. And for the item amount, I'm going to set the minimal desired width to 75. And that should be all in here. So compile and save it, and let's dive into the graph. And that's also going to be very simple. So first of all, let's add two variables, the item name. And that's a text variable, not a name, but text. And we want to get the item amount. And that's an integer. So let's grab our event construct over here, and we're going to make our variables instance editable, by the way. So instance editable expose on spawn for both of them, item count and item name. And then we can simply drag in the item name and set the text, plug it in and grab the variable, and do the same thing for the item amount. So make sure that we grab the text item amount and grab the item amount and to text integer. So I'm going to disable grouping, and that should be fine. So that's our item counter row, and now we can go into our player in-game HUD. So let's open the in-game HUD, and let's simply add it over here. So first of all, let's grab a border. I'm going to put it at the bottom left over here. So anchors bottom left. Grab my cheat sheet quickly. So I'm going to set the alignment to 55 and then -55. And then I'm going to use size to content, so we don't need it for the alignment over here. The second one, I'm going to set it to 1. Now let's change the brush color. So over here, so my black border. Inside of the border, we want to drop a vertical box. So vertical box inside of the border. So the vertical box is going to be a variable. So let's do that first. Vertical box item counter. And make sure it's a variable over here. Then we're going to go back to the border and change that into our border debug item counter. And that also needs to be a variable. And we can grab one of our item rows, so that's the item counter row, and if we drag it inside of the vertical box, then we can kind of see what happens. So let's grab the border and set it to size to fit, and that should be pretty much good to go. So for the border, I'm also going to set the visibility to hidden by default. So that's done. Then if we go inside of the graph, we want to create a function for this that will simply count all of the items. So I'm going to call this function debug item counter. Grabbing my notes quickly. There we go. So create a new function, debug item counter. And well, this is going to be kind of annoying, but let's just drag off here, and we're going to get all actors of class. So first of all, we're going to grab all of the pickups. So let's look for all the pickups in the level. And we want to loop through them. So get a for each loop, plug it in over here. So for the for each loop, so this is the actual pickup item. We're going to drag off here, and we're going to get the contents from the item. So this is also an array. So again, we're going to grab a for each loop over here and plug that in. We want to break the array element, so that's our contents array, and then we want to set this up. So I'm going to create a new local variable, and that's our item map. So let's create a new variable, local item map. So the first variable is going to be a name, and then turn it into a mapping, and the second variable is going to be an integer. Then we want to grab a branch over here for the loop body, plug it in, and we want to find the item row name inside of our item map. So check if we already have it or not. So let's look find, plug it in over here, plug this one into the branch. So if this is false, then this is a new item, so we can drag in our local item map, and we're gonna add, plug this one into the false bin, and we're gonna simply use the item row name from the structure and also the amount from the structure. So there's no need to add anything to it because this is the first one. And for the true pin, we're gonna copy this, plug it in over here. So the item row name actually the same one, so plug it in as well, but for the amount we want to add it to whatever returns from the find node over here. So we can drag off the item amount, do add, and plug in the result from the find node and plug that one into the array add element. And this should be good. So this will loop through all of the pickups and then count them and store them into our item map. Then we also want to grab all of the containers in the world. So let's go to the first for each loop, completed pin, and then we're going to get all actors of class again. So this time we want to get all of our containers, PP containers. We're going to loop through them, and for each container we're going to get the contents again. And for the contents, again, we want to grab a for each loop. So we want to loop through the content array and plug it in over here. So let's break it. And then we can do the same thing again. So let's just copy all of this stuff and paste it over here, plug it into the loop body, and make sure that we connect up all of the pins. So the item row name and the item amount. And the item amount also goes into the add node over here. So we have the pickups and the containers done. Then we also need to check all of the inventories from the players. So let's drag off the completed pin for this for each loop again. So the first one. And again, get all actors of class. So this time we want to get all of the third person characters. And grab a for each loop. So for each character, we're going to grab the player inventory. So get player inventory. Grab another for each loop and plug it in over here. So we want to break this element, and then we can do the same thing again. So we can copy and paste all of this stuff over here, plug this into the loop body, and make sure that we connect up our item name and our amounts. So now we have all of the possible items in the level stored in our item map, and we want to make sure that we add it to our debugger. So for the for each loop completed pin, again, we're going to grab our vertical box for the item counter, and we're going to clear all the children. So it's empty again. And then we're simply going to grab all of the keys from our item map. So let's grab the item map and look for keys. And that will return an array with all of the items inside of this map. So that's all of our item row names. So we're going to grab a for each loop. Now plug it in over here. And then we want to create our item counter row widget. So let's create a widget. And turn this into our item counter row. Oh, really? So let's see, for the item amount, we can actually grab our item map over here, and we can find the array element in here. And then the result for that is the item amount. And for the name, we can drag off the array element as well over here. And we can simply plug it in, and that will convert it to our text variable. That should work. So for the owning player, we're going to get our owning player and plug it in the reference to our controller. And with this in place, we want to add it to the vertical box. So let's grab the vertical box item counter and add a child and plug in the return value, and that should work. So with this function in place, let's compile it and go to the event graph. So for event construct, we actually check if we are the server, and I'm only going to use this on the server because the server is the only one that has easy access to all of the variables. And as you can see, we are using quite a lot of get all actors from class, and this is kind of heavy to run. So if we want to run this on all 4 players and update it like every 0.1 second, then we're probably going to notice that. So I'm not going to make it too heavy. I'm simply going to drag off the isServer true pin. And first I want to set the visibility for the border. So drag off the border item counter and set the visibility. Plug it into the true pin and make sure it's visible. And then I'm just going to call this once a second. So I'm going to drag in my debug item counter function, call it. And then grab a delay, plug it in over here. And we're going to wait for 1 second, and then we're going to update everything again. Okay, so I think we are good to go. Now the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that in my level I have the same amount of each item. So let me open the map and grab a viewport in here. So let me double check. So we actually have each item here, and both or all of them have 2 items in the content. So that means there are 4 of each of these items. And then in this container, let's see what we have inside here. So we have 2 fans and 4 dishes. So let's make these 2 dishes. And then in this container, let's make this 2 orbs. So now there should technically be 6 items of each in the level. So let's save this. And then the next thing I'm going to do is go into the Explorer and make sure that I remove the save game. So let's go to the saved folder and then save games and just get rid of all of this stuff. So that should be good as well. Now let's launch the game and see what happens. So we have the correct prints on screen. It's grabbing the data from the world and storing it in the save game. So let's select the slot for the client. So we have that set up. So the server has the counter on screen and there's 6 of each items in the level. So that should be good. Now let's see, I can take an item from here. So that seems to be working. So for now we can't pick what item we are actually taking or placing. This is temporary. We're going to add the drag and drop later and then we don't use these buttons anymore. So this is just for testing. So the item counter still seems to be up to date. So that's good. Now let's grab a few items from here and drop these inside of a chest. But first I'm going to grab the client and I'm also going to open this chest to see if things update as well. So let me place a few items in here. And that's actually updating for the client. And the client can take them from there as well. And that's updating for the server. So that seems to be working as well. So let's go to this chest over here and just take some items without the client watching. And then let's see if that updates for the client as well. So we have 2 fans in there. I think that was correct. That seems to be good. So I think we have everything pretty much set up and good to go. So you can play around with this a little bit and make sure that the item counts actually match up. So we could, for example, close it down and now open it back up. And now you will see at the beginning the item count is actually off. There's 4 orbs and there should be 6, but the client doesn't have the save slot selected yet. So always make sure that you select the save slots, and now the item counter will update and all of the items are actually there because there's 2 in the client's inventory. So I think all of this is working. That was today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. We did make pretty good progress, although it was a bit long episode. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and I'll be back soon for more. Thanks for watching. Later.